We've covered a lot in this series, from isolation to cultural bias to identity shifts, organizational failures, delegation, burnout, difficult conversations, even mistakes. All the gaps nobody talks about. But here's what you might be wondering: how does it all fit together? This episode is the answer: the complete responsibility to impact model, the framework that integrates everything you've learned, the roadmap for your entire leadership journey. This is what it's all been building towards. Here's what traditional leadership development gets completely wrong: it gives you tips, tactics, individual skills. Be more confident, delegate better, have difficult conversations. But it doesn't give you the framework that connects it all together. So you end up with a bunch of disconnected advice you're supposed to implement. No understanding of how all of the pieces fits together, no clear path from where you are to where you want to be. You know you're supposed to be a better leader, but nobody's giving you the actual model of how do you do that. That's the gaps this series closes. The responsibility to impact model isn't just another leadership framework. It's the framework that explains why you're struggling with all those gaps we've covered and how to navigate every single one of them. Let me show you how. I'm Dr. Tonya Biglow, and I developed the responsibility to impact model after coaching technical professionals through leadership transitions. I kept seeing the same pattern: brilliant people promoted for their technical skills, struggling in leadership, told they lacked confidence or needed more executive presence. But that wasn't the problem. The problem was they were trying to lead with an individual contributor mindset, but they were doing so in a leadership role. And traditional leadership development wasn't helping because it focused on behavior, not the fundamental shift required. So I built this model: a framework that addresses the actual transition technical professionals need to make from individual contributor to leader, from expert to developer of experts, from controlling outcomes to taking responsibility for outcomes you can't control. Essentially, moving from responsibility to impact. The responsibility to impact model has 5 pillars. Each pillar addresses one of the fundamental shifts required for leadership. And everything we've covered in this series fits into these 5 pillars. Let me break it down for you. As an individual contributor, your value comes from what you can do, your technical skills, your expertise, your output. As a leader, though, your value comes from what your team can do. That's the first shift. This pillar is about letting go of being the experts. Your identity has to shift. You're no longer the person with all of the answers. You're the person who develops people, who finds the answer. Delegation. You can't do it all yourself. You have to build capacity in others. Development over doing. Your job isn't to solve every problem anymore. It's to develop problem solvers. The question this pillar answers is: how do I transition from doing the work to enabling the work? Pillar 2: from control to responsibility. So if you had hard work, that led to you executing well, which led to you delivering results, which ultimately equaled success for you. Direct cause and effect. As a leader, though, you're responsible for outcomes you don't directly control. That's the second shift. This pillar is about taking responsibility without control. You're accountable for your team's results, but you can't control their choices. And that gap creates anxiety, but it's normal. Building systems, not just working harder. You can't control everything, but you can create conditions for success. Leading through influence, not authority. Your title doesn't make people follow you. Your leadership does. Here's the question this pillar answers: how do I lead when I can't control the outcomes? Pillar number 3: from isolation to connection. Technical professionals often become leaders because they were great at individual work, but leadership is really relational. That's the third shift. This pillar is about breaking through isolation, building your 3-dimensional support system: your internal confidence, your external mentorship, and your peer advocacy. Navigating cultural dynamics, understanding that leadership expectations are culturally shaped, learning to navigate or challenge those expectations. Building authentic relationships. Leadership requires real connections, not transactional relationships, real trust. Advocating for support. You can't do this alone, and asking for support isn't weakness, it's strategic. So, the question that this pillar answers is, how do I build the relationships and support I need to lead effectively? Pillar number 4, from perfection to resilience. As an individual contributor, you could be perfect. You controlled your work, you executed flawlessly, you delivered quality. But as a leader, perfection isn't even possible. That's the 4th shift. This pillar is about sustainable leadership. You can't maintain perfection. You have to manage your energy, protect recovery, and lead in the way you can sustain. Handling mistakes with grace. Listen, you will make mistakes. How you recover defines your leadership more than never making a mistake. Building resilience over performance. Leadership isn't about having it all together. It's about bouncing back when things fall apart. Modeling humanity for your team. Listen, when you show that you're human, that you make mistakes, that you need support, that you have limits, you unconsciously give your team permission to be human too. So the question this pillar answers is, how do I lead sustainably without burning out or pretending to be perfect? And pillar number 5, from avoidance to accountability. As an individual contributor, you could avoid hard things, conflicts, difficult conversations, uncomfortable decisions. But as a leader, avoidance is non negotiable. That's the 5th shift. This pillar is about having difficult conversations. Listen, clarity is kindness, avoidance is cruelty. The conversations you avoid are the ones causing the most damage. Holding standards. When you tolerate poor performance or toxic behavior, you signal that standards don't matter. Leadership requires accountability. Making decisions with incomplete information. Listen, you won't have all the answers, but you will have to decide anyway. Taking ownership. When things go wrong, you don't deflect. You own it. You fix it. You learn from it. Now, the question this pillar answers is, how do I have the courage to lead through hard times? Here's what makes the responsibility to impact model different. These 5 pillars aren't separate, they're integrated. You can't develop others if you're isolated and unsupported. You can't take responsibility without control if you're burned out from trying to be perfect. You can't hold accountability if you haven't learned to delegate. They all work together. The model shows you where you are in your leadership journey, which pillar needs the most attention right now, how to develop each pillar systematically, how they reinforce each other as you grow. And here's the promise. When you develop all 5 pillars, you go from expert to developer, from control to responsibility, from isolation to connection, from perfection to resilience, from avoidance to accountability, essentially from responsibility to impact. That's the transformation. And here's what happens when you lead using the responsibility to impact model. You stop feeling like an imposter because you have a framework. You understand the shifts. You know what good leadership actually requires. You stop trying to figure it out alone because you know connection is a pillar. Support isn't optional, it's strategic. You stop burning out because you know resilience is more important than perfection. You protect your energy intentionally. You stop avoiding the hard things because you know accountability is required and you have the frameworks to navigate difficult conversations and resistance. You stop being the bottleneck because you know your job is to develop others, not to do everything yourself. And most importantly, you start leading with clarity, confidence, and impact. Not because you're perfect, but because you understand what leadership actually requires and you have a model for how to do it. Now, here's what I want you to do. Assess which pillar needs the most attention in your leadership right now. Are you struggling with delegation, feeling anxious about responsibility without control, isolated and unsupported, burned out or afraid of making mistakes, avoiding difficult conversations? Start there. Wherever you are, start there. Then I want you to go back and rewatch the episode that addresses that pillar. Use the frameworks, implement the practices, build that pillar systematically. And then I want you to download the complete responsibility to impact model guide. The link is in the description. The download includes the full model visual, a self-assessment for each pillar, a development plan for strengthening each one, how the pillars integrate, resources for going deeper. And if you want to really go deeper, the book, The Responsibility Effect, breaks down the entire model with stories, frameworks, and a step-by-step guidance. You can find the link to the book in the description. This series gave you the overview. The book gives you a deep dive. Or if you want personalized support, I work with technical professionals one-on-one to build these 5 pillars systematically. If you're ready for that, the link is in the description as well. You started this series as a technical professional trying to figure out leadership. Maybe you were isolated. Maybe you were struggling with cultural expectations, overwhelmed by responsibility you couldn't control, avoiding difficult conversations, or afraid of making mistakes. But here's what I hope you see now. You're not broken. The system wasn't designed for how you think and operate. And the responsibility to impact model gives you a different path, a path that honors who you are, that builds on your strengths, that addresses the real gaps you're facing. You don't have to fake it till you make it. You don't have to perform a version of leadership that isn't you. All you got to do is make 5 shifts from expert to developer, from control to responsibility, from isolation to connection, from perfection to resilience, from avoidance to accountability. And when you make those shifts, you don't just become a leader, you become the kind of leader people actually want to follow. Honest, resilient, connected, accountable, human. That's what the responsibility to impact model builds. And that's who you are becoming. This is the final episode of the Leadership Gaps Nobody Talks About. 12 episodes, 12 gaps, 1 integrated framework. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for doing the work. Thank you for refusing to settle for generic leadership advice that doesn't fit who you are. You showed up for every episode. You engaged. You implemented. You grew. That's leadership. Not perfection and not performance. Commitment to growth. And that right there, that's what will make you successful. I'm Dr. Tonya Biglow. This has been the Leadership Gap Nobody Talks About. You have the model. You have the frameworks. You have everything you need. Now go close the gaps. From responsibility to impact. You've got this.